Hello, welcome to Just One Thing for Parents. I'm Bettina Honan. Today, I was really thrilled to welcome back Tara Porter to the show. Tara is a clinical psychologist. She published a book a few years ago called You Don't Understand Me, A Young Woman's Guide to Life. And she's just published another book, which is called Good Enough, a manifesto for modern parenting. Tara talked in the past about healthy eating, but today we focused on perfectionism in young people, which is really on the rise. I think it's very topical in today's culture of high expectations, particularly around education. Perfectionism is increasing and it's problematic. So Tara will talk about what perfectionism is, how it presents in young people, and we'll talk a little bit about what parents can do to prevent it at home if they see some perfectionism in the young people in their family, what they can do to support them. So please keep listening to my interview with Tara Porter. So welcome, Tara. Thank you so much for coming back today.
Oh, it's lovely to be here.
So I said to Tara, beginning of term here in England, kids going back to school, what is one tip you could give to parents to help them prepare for this year ahead in the context of what's going on in our culture today? So there's your question.
Well, and my answer to you was let's avoid perfectionism. Let's avoid perfectionism as we go back to school, and let's think of really what about perfectionism is, and think about why it's bad for kids, and think about what we can do to parents in a society, in a culture, in an education system which really pushes pushes perfectionism, pushes the kind of relentless pursuit of better and constant standards and constant expectations on kids and how we protect them against that.
It's incredibly hard because, as you say, there's a culture, all the messages kids are getting from the outside, from school, from social media, probably, is this idea of being better and being the best, or kind of, yeah, this very
Yeah.
competitive kind of environment that they're in, isn't it?
It really is. And we know that competition can be helpful to kids when it's a low stakes sort of competition, like when kids play sport or in a board game or something like that. It can be healthy and appropriate, but that when their whole life is in competition, that we know that that's really bad for kids.
Mm.
So we've gone right in there, haven't we? Yes, so, perfectionism is the relentless pursuit of better, and it's often associated with this kind of negative beating oneself up when you can't meet standards. But if you do meet the standards, then the bar just gets raised higher. So it never stops, And kind of that's what an education system is, isn't it? You get your GCSEs, and I see a lot of kids after they've got their GCSEs, and even if they've done well, there's a sort of sense of meh, as they say, meh
Yeah.
about it, that they have to go on and start again and do the A levels, and as soon as they get the A levels, they're off to whatever university the sorting hat of UCAS has allowed them into, and then and so on and so forth. So there's this constant sort of sense of when you reach a standard, the standards just get raised, and lots of kids we know find that really difficult and develop ideas about constantly working or constantly striving, or that they're not good enough, this sense of not being enough
Mm.
in this culture. Yeah. And we
Mm.
know that levels of perfectionism are
Mm.
going up in society. So there's some great research by um, Cohen and Hill, which showed that the perfectionism has gone up about 32%. I think it was from 1986 to 2006 or something like that, but over
In
sort of
children.
in college students in America, in Canada, and in
Wow.
the UK. Yeah.
Wow.
And why we have to be worried about that is perfectionism is linked to many mental health conditions.
Mm.
It's almost the mechanism of many mental health conditions. So it's the kind of it runs eating disorders.
Right.
It can run OCD, anxiety. It's linked to depression. It's linked to self-harm. It's linked to suicidality. So it's really a huge problem, and And like you said, Bettina, it's coming at us from the culture and society. It's coming at our kids from social media. It's coming at our kids in the education system. And if they're not careful, or we're not careful, it can come at them from us as parents.
Mm. Yeah, of course, as parents, we all want our kids to do well as be well, but we want them to do well because we know that doing well educationally is protective. It gives you options, it opens doors. So with the best will in the world, we can often, I think, probably inadvertently reinforce maybe a bit of a perfectionist mindset. Do you think that happens, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, that almost certainly happens. So, the researchers I mentioned before have looked at, y- uh, um, and other researchers looking at what happens in schools have found that, parents with kind of this sort of relentless expectations themselves and a kind of critical attitude can really contribute to the development of perfectionism in adolescence.
Mm,
And so, what we're looking at here, Gina, I think is very much something that as parents we have to get the right amount of.
yes.
It's a Goldilocks factor, really. It's
Mm,
not too much and it's not too little. Too little would mean kids weren't getting opportunities, they weren't being encouraged, they weren't having a supportive environment, but too much is really dangerous too. And I don't think we recognize that as parents. I don't think we recognize that as a culture, but certainly in CAMS clinics, in clinics with young people in their late teens and early 20s, just see it all the time, that kind of feeling of not enoughness that which comes from having kind of relentless standards on us. So
mm,
as parents, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get a balance, yeah? We're trying to look for that tipping point.
mm,
And sometimes I see it in clinic, when I'm assessing a young person, and they often come to the first session with often it's a young woman. I think young women are perhaps more likely to struggle with perfectionism. And they come into the session, they're presenting with perhaps self-harm or an eating disorder or something like that. And the parents are kind of poleaxed from discovering that their daughter is struggling. And they say to me something like, "Oh, she's always been such a good girl. She's always worked so hard in school. She was great. She was the backbone of the swim team. She
mm.
plays the piano and she's really talented at French or whatever it is." And as they speak, I can almost see their daughter sort of sink a bit. It's
Mm,
like that there's a weight on her shoulder.
mm.
And it's like that all those achievements and all those opportunities and all those talents have become like a yoke that are weighing her down,
Wow.
that she
Yeah.
has to live up to.
Yes.
So, as parents, what I think the really important thing is to think about the tipping point where opportunities that we're giving kids turn into expectations in
Mm.
their heads. Yeah. And there's a
Yeah.
tipping point where that happens. And often it's where we start grading and watching and when the activities get too, so for example, somebody has a talent at swimming or t tennis and we get them signed up 3 or 4 times a week and it starts to become
Mm,
very serious, or when the activities there's too many of them. So when people have kids have double-decker activity on top of school curriculum and homework
mm,
and all of that sort of thing in the evening, that's when I think it can
mm.
start to happen.
And I think sometimes, yeah, I really hear you. Those kids, they take on that identity so much, don't they? Because the teenage years, starting around the time of secondary school, is all about identity. Who am I and how am I different to other people? And it sounds like what you're saying, if you come in too strong with reinforcing that with all this positive praise, and everywhere, every room they walk into, you say, oh, look, she did this brilliantly or she did that brilliantly. That even though obviously that comes from a good place as a parent, we always want to praise our kids. If you do that too much, that identity becomes all that they are and they can't break out of it. Is that a bit of what's going on?
Yeah, I don't think that's so much linked to the praise so much, but I think it's linked to yeah, a sense of identity linked to doing well, yeah, and the
Mm,
feeling that you're letting, letting your pet, when young people say it to me, they feel like they're letting people down if they stopped. So they might
yeah.
say, I say, well, they come in and they feel relentless pressure to do this homework to a sort of A-star standard, and to manage that pressure, they're cutting their arms. And I sort of say to them, well, maybe that's wrong. Maybe you should just try and get an A, and they say, but my parents or my teachers will be disappointed in me.
Yeah. And the parents at
Yeah.
the same time will often be saying, I'm not putting any pressure on them. I really don't care how they do.
Yeah, but you see,
So
the
where does
impressive,
that pressure come from?
well, I think the pressure, it does come from the culture and the society we're in,
Yeah.
but we have to be really careful about that, because often what we do then is parents will often say, I'm not putting any pressure on her, and I've employed a tutor so
Yeah.
that she can carry on getting the A star that
Yeah.
she wants to get. And of course, that's intrinsically pressuring, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
intrinsically saying this is really important. And of
Mm,
course, what you said is true, Bettina. It is important that kids do well, but it's important that they do well at a level that they can manage without having to work, you know, ridiculously long hours,
mm,
or, feel so stressed about it that they have to,
mm,
not eat, or
yeah.
develop rituals like OCD to manage the pressure.
Mm,
It has to be a pressure which is within, a safe and healthy range of
yeah.
pressure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what you say there about what we inadvertently, the messages we inadvertently give kids are so important, because we can be saying, I don't care how you do, I really don't. But if the first thing we say to them when they come in the door is, how did you do in that test?
Mm.
Or what did everybody else get?
Mm.
Or when they say, oh my God, I have to stay up because I've got to get an A, rather than saying, no, 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 your sleep is a priority, we say, okay. So we actually allow the grades and the learning to be the thing that even like breaks the rules, breaks the family rules. I can't have dinner because I have to do my essay, and parents will say, "Well, I had to let them do that." And those are the messages I think you give them about how important it is. I think in
Yeah.
that situation to say, "No, actually, family dinner is really important. Yeah, schoolwork's important, but it's not more important than our time together."
No, exactly. You've exactly put the nail on the head there. It's absolutely that. But I think also parents think that they're being a good parent in doing that, because
Yes.
that's reinforced by school and society, and the academic system, where standards have got higher and higher.
Mm,
The grades have changed from, A's to A stars, from A stars to 8 to 9. So
yeah.
we're reinforced in that, and we see that in the absolute explosion of tutoring. So it can be really difficult for parents to hold the faith of
Yeah.
allowing your child to work at a level which they can healthily sustain, and they don't need
Mm,
uh, to feel really awful about it,
mm,
and to recognize that actually, grades are important, but they're not the only thing that's important in where kids end up, and what,
mm.
university they go to, or what they study, or
Yeah.
how they do, in their work. That kids have kind of now, well, we all have kind of zigzag career paths, and
Mm.
it's not all a sort of straight line of GCSEs, A levels
Yeah.
degree. We can take steps back. We can not go to one university and go to another one, and it'd be
Mm,
fine.
mm,
And I see lots of young people who've, worked on that relentless path and gone to the sort of, a top university, and then had to leave because they're unhappy, or they don't like it, or they don't like their course, or
mm,
think. So it's really important that we hold the faith that they have lots of natural abilities, some of which are captured by exams.
mm.
They have a natural capacity to work, or and how hard they can work and stay mentally well,
Yeah.
and all those different factors, and hold that in mind.
Yeah. I was talking at a school recently, and I was talking about all the teenage brain and how teenagers need to take risks and all of that. And one of the teachers said, so, what about if you have a child who isn't taking any risks, who's, I think she was describing what we would say is quite a perfectionist child who never stood out of line, who stepped out of line, who, was perfectionist in everything she did. And I said to her, that's not good. There are some kids where they are too good for their own good. And we have to step in and say that, well, I mean, you have to think carefully about how you say it, but we have to have an alarm going off in our head about that just as much as we have an alarm going off in our head about the kids who won't engage educationally or academically.
Yeah, and perfectionism falls at both ends as well, because I see a lot of kids who are the procrastinator perfectionists,
Oh,
who, who actually have kind of have heard all these standards and
right.
can't quite reach them, and so have stopped trying. It's
Mm,
just too stressful to go to school, and then we get into emotionally based school
mm,
avoidance and all sorts of different problems. So.
yeah,
And kids who, won't do their homework for parents at night, arguing and fighting against it, but partly because they don't want to fail because
yeah.
they hear so much, sort of perfectionistic pressure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I read a great paper actually. They talked about the importance of roles in school. And they said there are a limited number of roles in schools. There are some pro-school roles, which are I'll be the academic kid, all the teachers will like me, whatever. And then there are anti-school roles. And those are like, I'll be the class clown or, smoke
The
weed,
rebel.
the rebel, exactly. And what they say is that teenagers need to have a role. They have to have an identity. And if a pro school role is not available to them, they will go for an anti school role. So
Mm.
think about that when you're looking at a child's behavior as one of the lenses. And I thought that was so good. Any identity or role that gets too fixed in a teenager is problematic, isn't it? We want them to be flexible. We want them to be going through different identities, trying different things. Is what teenagers are supposed to do, aren't they? Try things out. Would you agree with that?
I mean, that takes
Yeah.
me to the idea of good enough, which is, what I wrote a book about, this idea that when we're good enough parents, when we show that flexibility, that standing back slightly, that's more reflective stance, that they're not always pushing forward or thinking that everything has to be on a kind of upward trajectory. It gives children the
Yeah.
space and the flexibility to find their own identity to change. We're not invested in their performance on the tennis.
Mm.
What do tennis? What
Tournament.
competitions? Yeah, like a tournaments. That's the word. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, that's
So you mean modeling it
well,
in,
modeling is
yeah,
really important.
yeah.
It's really important, and it's also important too because it gives a different voice when they go into the school system. Or, I mean, well, the other thing we touched on at the beginning, but I'll bring it back
Mm.
to this part of the conversation because when we're talking about young people are developing that sense of identity, and perhaps in their primary years or the first years of secondary schools. And
Mm.
what we're doing when they're developing that kind of perfectionism is that they're having a third person's voice in their head that they should be doing this. They should be getting A's. They should be performing piano. They should be being a good girl and being kind to everybody and nice to everybody and all this. So it's a third person coming in with the standards. But of course, as they develop and they start to look more towards their peers,
Mm.
and they'll look more towards social media, they're used to looking for approval from others.
Mm-hmm.
And as a parent, then you, in the late teens, you get less
Mm.
control over whose standards they're meeting.
Mm.
So I see that quite a lot. So the sort of good girl, the people pleaser, the perfectionist in early teens turns into a young woman who really struggles to have boundaries of saying no to people,
Yeah.
who can follow the crowd on social media, feeling like she's got to look a particular way. And that's what
Mm.
we also have to watch with the perfectionistic
Yeah.
mindset because they will take standards from everyone. They'll take them from
Yeah.
us as parents, they'll take them from school, they'll take them from social
Mm.
media.
And let's face it, it's quite nice having a kid who is fulfilling all of those standards. And maybe
Oh,
it's
yeah.
quite hard for parents sometimes to stand up to them and say, don't worry about getting all those grades. I think we have to probably reflect on that as a parent as well, don't we? And say you have to let go of that kind of reflected glory in your kind of exceptional child a little bit as well, perhaps.
Yeah, and I think the thing to remember in that is that the perfectionistic mindset is always a future focused mindset. It's
Mm.
a future focus and it's an external standard. You're trying to meet a different standard. You're trying to get an A, you're trying to get grade 8 piano, you're trying to meet this external future focused standard that you're working towards. And of course, we know that if you ask any guru, what's the secret of happiness? What is the secret of happiness? It's being in the moment, right? It's
Yes.
appreciating the moment. So
Yeah.
we're constantly training kids out of that mindset. So
Right.
I don't think it's particularly about encouraging those sort of people pleasers, perfectionistic type children to fail. I think it's about encouraging them to be in the moment.
Right. I love that. I just did my yoga teacher training. So I will talk about that now. I'm
We've,
being
we've brought it full circle back to
full
your,
circle.
yeah.
So
It's
Tara,
about being
thank
in the moment. Yeah.
it's about being in the moment. I love that. So okay, I know we've talked about so many ideas, and I don't want to ask you, it's hard to ask you for just one thing, but I wonder if you could maybe end with one or two just ideas that parents could leave with, particularly if they're noticing this perfectionist mindset is developing in their child or they see it in their child, but a couple of things they could do at home to kind of break it or reduce it.
Well, let's go from where we were. It's being in the moment. So encourage joy, encourage fun. What you said earlier about, family dinner is just as important as a test, but
Yeah.
so is, dancing around the kitchen after family dinner or going out spontaneously for ice cream because it's a sunny evening or,
Mm,
all sorts of different things. So
I love
encouraging
that.
joy and encouraging that being in the moment. And then the other thing about perfectionism as it's transmitted from parents, when we get a bit too perfectionist as parents and when we transmit that to children,
Mm,
is that it takes away from the relationship.
mm.
So, what you're talking about when um when we sometimes I do talks about perfectionism in the evening and then I come home to my own children, it's really hard not to go, have you done your homework?
Yeah.
And so we have to catch ourselves and say,
Yeah.
okay, this is about a relationship. Parenting is a relationship. So how do we reconnect to the relationship? So how are you? How was your
Yeah.
day? What's going
Yeah.
on for you?
Yeah.
So thinking about joy and being in the moment and thinking about relationships are two things you can do as a parent to pull away from the perfectionistic standards, the future focused external standards that you have to meet.
Amazing. Oh, fantastic. Tara, thank you so much for coming on
Oh,
today.
pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. It's going to be so helpful for parents and good luck, parents, for the beginning of term.
Absolutely.